Hi, it's Jade. You'll probably know me from our first video, our system introduction, but I didn't actually introduce myself in that video, so this is my Meet the Elders. So I'm 27, I use she, her pronouns, and as you can see from my picture, I'm non-human. I am a white tiger, but the colors are inverted, so I'm a black tiger with white stripes, but I'm made out of light and darkness, essentially, so I'm not tangible unless I want to be. You can't touch me unless I want you to. So when I'm playing with littles and things like that, they can ride on my back, but no one's gonna sneak up behind me or anything like that. I am the host of the Dark Core subsystem, but I'm also the main protector of that subsystem. And that has to do with some recent integrations or fusions that I'll get into in a little bit. But I'm one of the major executives of our system, so most decisions that affect more than one person will go past me, even if it's not a full executive vote. Part of that reason is because I'm the primary external protector, so I am first on call for anything potentially scary or dangerous that's going on out here in the external world. I am also an internal protector, but I'm a secondary one because my focus, like my priority, is going to be out here. And then if things are going on inside, but things are okay out here, I'll go help out inside. And there is a surprising amount of things that can go on in an inner world, and we've touched on that a couple times in a few ways, but there can be a lot of conflict, especially with the size that our system is. Not everybody agrees, and sometimes people disagree passionately enough to require protectors inside, so I am one of those as well. I am one of our system's major trauma holders. The Dark Core subsystem is the subsystem that formed around our original trauma holder, and I still hold a lot of those memories. I have split a lot, so I don't hold anywhere near all of the memories that I held at one point or another, but I hold a lot of them still. Part of my job is to keep those memories to myself until I am ready to process them and until some others in the system are ready to have some of that information. I don't believe in sharing memories of the kind that I have, but it sometimes is helpful to give a little bit of information without fully sharing the memory. And I'll get into why I feel so strongly about sharing memories a little bit later in this video. But yeah, I am one of the main trauma holders. And along those lines, and along the lines of what I'm going to get into a little more later, I am a reformed persecutor, and I was one of our early persecutors, and arguably one of our worst and most dangerous persecutors. So I have made a long transition from being a major persecutor, like a very active, passionate persecutor, all the way to being primary external protector. And that's the story that I'm going to get into right now. Since I hold so many memories of childhood trauma, and since that was my job and my only job at the time, those were my only experiences at the time. I was either inside our inner world, or I was out here and something bad was happening to me. The only exceptions to that are if there was a strong enough trigger that I thought something bad was about to happen, but it didn't. But the second we were sure that it wasn't going to, I went back inside. So I don't have any good childhood memories, and that is something that I have struggled with a lot because of how unfair that is, and how I shouldn't have had to deal with all of the bad things without balancing it out with any of the good things. And that is a big part of what actually pushed me into becoming a persecutor in the first place. I was so angry that Anna in particular got to have all of these wonderful experiences, and anytime anything was the slightest bit scary, I would step in and take over for her, and I didn't have a choice. I didn't care about her. I didn't know her at all. I was totally separate from everybody else in the inner world. I didn't know anybody else personally, with one exception. I hated my life for very good reason, and I hated Anna for very bad reason. I didn't think it was fair, which is true, but it wasn't her fault either. She didn't choose to be the one that nothing bad happened to. She didn't choose for me to be the one that everything bad happened to. So it was not her fault, and I'm glad that she got to have a happy childhood, and I understand better now that not every second of her childhood was happy either, that she just has different kinds of bad experiences than I do. But I hated her, and I wanted her to understand just how badly I was hurting, so I would lash out at her with memories, which is why I feel so strongly about never doing that. Even if it's not meant to cause harm, it can cause a lot of harm. And she couldn't handle my memories, and my days as a persecutor are the reason that Anna's subsystem exists. She was not part of a subsystem yet until I became a persecutor and lashed out at her so much that she split that much that she has a subsystem now. And this dog's barking in the background. I deeply, deeply regret doing that to her. But I had no context for anything that was going on, and I don't know that I was capable of reacting differently at the time. It didn't feel like a choice. It felt like the only thing there was to do. And all of the evidence in my life, from just the things that I experienced. Again, several others had very different experiences about our childhood, but from my experience, I had no reason to believe that anyone would have my back, that anyone would ever help me, that anything good could ever happen. So I was constantly expecting the worst in people because I was constantly seeing the worst in people. And if bad things were happening to me and good things were happening to someone else, that meant that that person was making the bad things happen to me. That's the only way I could process it. That's the only thing that made sense to me at the time. And I understand now. I understand now that I drew an unbelievably short straw, that my area of the brain was the part that didn't get protected. But that happened totally outside of my control and Anna's, and it was not in any way her fault. And I don't blame her for it anymore. I still am very bitter about it. I'm still very angry about it. It's still very unfair. But I'm not angry at her. And I think that's an important difference. I'm going to give a trigger warning here for very brief mentions of self-harm and suicide, which the the trigger warning is practically as bad as what I'm gonna say, but also I guess a trigger warning for inpatient. Part of my initial months as a persecutor led up to me just being too overwhelmed with what life had handed to me and not wanting to deal with it anymore. So I had a suicide attempt that was very minor because it was interrupted by an alter who had not existed until I had my suicide attempt. So I caused a split, and that new alter who formed, his whole job was to just keep us from killing ourselves. So the two of us did not get along for a long time, but we've made up since then as well, and we work pretty closely together now, especially with internal protecting. I don't know if he would ever talk on here. He doesn't talk much, but he is extremely good at his job, and he saved our life. And then another one of our protectors at the time broke one of the major rules of our system by being vulnerable in front of someone else, telling someone else that we had self-harmed, and that ended up leading to us being inpatient for a few days, which was very traumatic for us. And it was terrifying because we were working very hard to hide the things that had been happening our whole childhood. Even though I know that sounds counterintuitive, like, if I'm in a safe place, why would I hide all the bad things that are happening? Maybe they can help. But we couldn't trust people like that. We couldn't believe that anybody was going to help, and we knew that there were consequences waiting for us if we told someone, especially if they didn't help. So we would have to have had absolute certainty that they were going to help and remove us from the things that were happening totally and completely for us to be able to open up by choice. But I had done something that made it really obvious that we weren't okay, so we had to be impatient, and we had to just act like it was normal depression, I guess. And I'm not minimizing that in any way, but I'm not minimizing depression. I left out a lot of information. We all left out a lot of information when we were there, and tried to convince everybody that it was just a chemical imbalance and no environmental factors of any kind, and all of that. And we apparently did a very good job. Nobody questioned anything. They kept us in therapy for a little bit, but we managed to, after a few months, convince our therapist that we were totally fine, and then got out of therapy, and then stopped taking our meds without telling anybody until we were totally off of them. And then we just worked very hard to mask and act like everything was okay until, depending on your perspective, until we had a breakdown at school and couldn't function anymore and had to medically withdraw. But we still didn't open up about trauma at that point, or about the system, or any of that. So you could count that as a point where we stopped masking, but we just couldn't mask for a bit there. But then we got past that point, and then actually stopped masking when Aaliyah found out about the system. Very slowly started masking less and less. And we definitely haven't totally stopped masking in all situations. That's not going to be realistic for us. But we are more open with some key people about how we're actually doing at any given moment. A big example being our partner system. We are very open with them for the most part about how we're doing, if we need help, any of those things. And we are also now open with therapists, psychiatrists, doctors, people like that, which is important and is something that was very, very hard for us to do because of how bad our inpatient experience was, which I'm not going to get into that story right now. It's mostly not mine to tell anyway, but we didn't have a good experience. But around that time, I had had a different name than Jade previously. I am not going to share what that name was. It was very derogatory. It's very triggering as a word to me, and it comes up very often, which is unfortunate, but I had a very derogatory name, and that's the way that I thought about myself. And I changed my name when we were 13, around the time that I became a persecutor, and I picked my name based on the character from Victorious, because she seemed very strong and like nobody could hurt her, and she was allowed to lash out at people who were doing things she didn't like, and those were all things that resonated with me a lot at the time. And a split that I had shortly after that actually made me look a lot like her. So I originally didn't have the black cat ears that you can probably see over there. I kind of became a fictive of Jade from Victorious for a while. But then another few splits happened, and I ended up having the black cat ears for a while. And then that was until just a few months ago, where I started having some integrations or fusions. So old Jade looked like this, and then this is what Primal looked like. So it's a little bit confusing because our partner system is named Primal Pack, but Primal had that name long before we met Primal Pack, so we weren't going to expect them to change it. Primal used they them pronouns, by the way, so if you want to talk about them, please use they them pronouns. But they were one of our main physical protectors and one of our main sexual protectors, whereas old Jade was primarily just a sexual protector. And then the first of the recent integrations to result in me now was old Jade and Primal, which actually resulted in me looking a lot like I look in this picture. Like I even used this exact avatar from that integration, but that wasn't the only integration. Hard to make that big enough so that you can see without cutting off my head. Like that. So that was Mama Bear. And Mama Bear was a giant, huge dragon, but her front legs and front feet were that of like a big bear. Black color, but not necessarily of a black bear, we're not sure, but she had like bear claws and all of that. And she was our main Avenger for the most part. So Avengers hold a lot of anger about the trauma that happened, and they specifically often think about and even want to retaliate against the people who caused that trauma. So Mama Bear was definitely very angry, a very, very strong protector, primarily an internal protector and primarily of littles. If anyone were to upset or threaten a little in our system in any way, they would be dealing with Mama Bear and they would wish they weren't. She had a pretty specific job and she was very, very good at it. and it was very important to her because it's not okay to hurt littles. I didn't actually change how I look very much with that integration once Mama Bear was added as well, because I'm pretty much just got bigger, like much, much bigger, and I can change how big I am. Because one of the things that Mama Bear was capable of, which I can still do, is if she needs to be bigger to deal with something, if she needs to be bigger to carry more littles or to fight whatever fight she's in or anything like that, she'll grow to the size she needs to be. And I can still do that now. So that was really the big change, like physically how I present in our inner world with this integration. I'm stronger than I used to be. I'm stronger than any of those individual pieces of who I am now used to be, and I have more patience than Mama Bear. I am able to talk through things, but I'm still able to handle situations her way if I need to, if it comes to that, but I don't have to jump there immediately like she would. I benefit a lot from her anger. It helps me with my shame, because being angry about the things that happened to me helps me to not feel responsible for the things that happened to me, which was one of the main struggles that old Jade had. And Primal was very strong physically and emotionally. They could dull their emotions to an extent when dealing with an emergency type situation, a crisis level situation, in order to just focus on that moment, deal with that moment, and then kind of process it later. Except they would frequently not process it later, which was part of why I think they needed to fuse. So we all kind of benefited from this, I think. Because old Jade did a lot of processing emotions, but didn't feel strong enough to handle a lot of the situations that went with the emotions she was processing, or I was processing. I never know how to talk about, like, past versions of myself, I guess. It's complicated. The big thing that changed everything for me, from being a persecutor to wanting to be a protector, was when I became a mom. And like Anna and Aaliyah have both said in their Meet the Altars videos, I'm another one of the moms in our system. And I don't mean I think of some of the littles as my children because they're really cute and I care about them and I kind of like adopted them. I mean, I am, like, biologically, as much as it can work that way, their mom. And I have a lot of cubs, actually, and one of the other things that these integrations helped with a lot, there were some complications about the cubs, because, for instance, one of my cubs was born or split, depending on how you want to think about it, before old Jade and Primal originally split from each other. So they were both kind of her mom. Primal did use the word mom just by using they them pronouns, just so everyone knows. But then that led to some tension at times about whether or not either of them, either of us, could like really count as her mom. And there were other little complications like that where this just kind of simplifies everything for our side of things. not all of the cubs were ready for such a big change, but they are making a lot of progress and doing better and getting used to Mom being a little bit different now, and getting used to trusting me and believing that I am enough the same person that they haven't lost me. So that's been hugely important to me, that they have been able to come that far. I am not going to introduce any of my cubs right now, because any of them who want to can introduce themselves later. The other reason I'm not going to introduce them right now is because I have 8 of them, so that would take a bit of time to do that, and I have already taken a bit of time for this video, so it's not going to be a super long one, but I don't want to make it a super long one. And I want to make sure that they all say only what they want to say about themselves, and that they feel totally comfortable with what we share on here, if anything. So I don't know if all of them will introduce themselves or not, but any of them who want to are welcome to. So I hope you have learned a thing or two about me, and let me know if you have any questions for me in the comments, or head over to our Discord. The link to that server is in the description below, as well as our Etsy shop. We are about to be adding a bunch of new items to our Etsy shop, as soon as we can take some pictures of them. So definitely check that out. We will also announce that on our Discord, so it's a good way to stay on top of things if you can head on over to the Discord. But thank you so much for watching either way, and like and subscribe and all of those things, and we'll see you next time. Bye!